Thanks for joining Multifamily Talks, a Real Page podcast. On this episode of the show, I'm joined by Tony Sousa, Vice President at RPM Living, but you may know him better as the most interesting man in multifamily. Tony recently transitioned into a new role at RPM, one that heavily focuses on leveraging LinkedIn and other mediums to drive awareness of the RPM brand. As a longtime LinkedIn influencer, it seems to be the perfect fit for him and his background. Our conversation explored his unique background as an actor and journalist and how he's able to apply those skills to benefit a property management company, the importance of being yourself while prioritizing personal development, the changing landscape around building and sharing company culture, and a brief exploration of what he calls his daily diet, which starts with a bowl of constructive criticism and finishes with a dessert of humble pie. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I enjoyed hosting it. And with that, let's get to the show. Well, Tony, I really appreciate you jumping on here. I've been following your LinkedIn journey, not as long as a lot of people have. I got to own. I think you came into my life probably 3 years ago, somewhere around there, and I've loved it. But for those who aren't necessarily as familiar with a little bit of your story as I am, give us a little bit about your background. You know, where you're at today, and just kind of how you got into multifamily housing.
Yeah. So I've lived a double life. You may know, some may know. I started this double life at 9 years old as an Elvis impersonator. And I thought I was going to be Elvis Presley for some time, and painted on my sideburns because they weren't growing in. Today I can get them to come in if I wanted them to. And then, so that was the early start. And I studied TV journalism and thought I was going to be an actor, and realized I needed to save some money to pay rent. And I was engaged at the time, and I thought, hey, I can lease an apartment, and got an opportunity. It wasn't the first interview. The first interview, they forgot about it. The doors were shut. They were out to lunch. But I came back and got the opportunity, and here we are. So try and try again.
The story of tenacity, and I guess it's kind of common, because the reason I'm in multifamily is because I was going to go get my master's, and I was engaged and trying to figure out how to actually pay bills, and an opportunity came along in student housing, and here we both are a number of years later.
No, the industry, I've tried to dissect a little bit. The industry, we always talk about, it brings everybody back. I think there's a couple things of the industry. I think it challenges us in a lot of different ways, that I think exercises a lot of muscles that we sometimes don't even know we had, and we enjoy using. And I also think I've come to realize that, multifamily is truly a family.
Yes.
And it's one that I think is very welcoming of new people and new ideas, and those who have been here a long time as well. I think everybody has a place in this industry, and so I think everyone seems to find their place, and hopefully in time, become comfortable in their place.
Well, I love that you call that a family, because I feel exactly the same way. It's a family. I tell people all the time, like, this is the smallest multi-billion-dollar industry you're ever going to be a part of. Never burn a bridge. But it's also the fact that we get to provide people their homes, and that just attracts good people to stay. If you don't like doing good things and helping people with their homes, you're probably not going to stick around in this. So. Anyway, so you mentioned you have a background in acting, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on and talk to you about, because I was actually listening to the Multifamily Collective that you did with Mike Brewer, right after the pandemic kind of era, and you said a couple things in there that made me reach out and want to set up. And since then, your career has taken a pretty dramatic right-hand turn that I really want to get into as well. But one of the things that struck me, especially as an actor, and it's something that I've dealt with myself, but also I hear a lot of people about it, is, you don't believe in faking it till you make it, and that imposter syndrome. And that's kind of where a lot of people, I think, do think they need to go. So I didn't get the chance to prompt Mike and say, dig into that more. But when you say don't fake it till you make it, especially as an actor, where do you come at that from?
I think there's a couple different angles you can come at it from. I think I learned some lessons the hard way I too tried to fake it until I made it for some time, until I was exposed. And when I was exposed, it exposed a lot of my own thoughts and frameworks in which I tried to proceed. And when I say exposed, I think I was essentially, this was years, probably earlier in my career, that I was thrust into a position that frankly I'm not sure I was qualified for. And what did I do? Obviously, I worked my tail off to figure out how to meet the qualifications, and then, of course, become successful. But it brought to light really a lot of things that you really cannot fake experience. You can't fake confidence. You can't fake a lot of those things that, frankly, you're in a position for. So I think recommending to people, especially younger folks, to fake it till you make it. I think sort of really lends its hand to what we now know as this imposter syndrome, which 10, 15 years ago we didn't really have a name for it. You just kind of felt you were in a position that you were in over your head a bit, and you had to kind of emotionally and mentally figure out how to make that adjustment or opt out, I guess, or step up one way or another. So that's my perspective. Now, is there a component to fake it till you make it that I think you exude the characteristics that you want to be, and then you ultimately become that? I strongly believe in that. I myself sort of am a visionary to myself, not even what people may think in regards to the industry, but are there things that I want to do, and do I want to be a better person, and do I sort of visualize that and want to become that? And in time, have I found that I've become closer to that, or moved myself emotionally and call it spiritually towards that goal? I think so. So I do think that that's a component. I don't think that's called fake it till you make it. I think that's really just believing and striving in some goals you have for yourself, and moving your way there. I think the challenge for a lot of associates today are they want to be there yesterday.
Right.
And so I think patience plays a big role in that. And patience comes with frankly, a lot of experience and some gray hair.
It's interesting. I heard the imposter syndrome reframed a little bit, and I'll give Adam Grant, the author, credit for this one. I was listening to his most recent book, and he was really saying, okay, if you're in a position where you feel like you're an imposter and you're in a position to grow. Like that is an opportunity to actually grow. And I think that, you and I are both kind of passionate about always wanting to push ourselves a little bit forward and growing in that way. So you touched on another thing that I like to go into quite a bit with my partners is, the idea of personal development, and what does that look like for different people at different times? You just mentioned growth. What is your personal development journey look like at this point in time? I'm sure it wasn't the way when you started, but
yeah. Sure. Yeah. I mean, everything's within context of where you are today, and everything builds on itself like a foundation, just as you would build a house or a real estate structure. You're doing that with yourself and your career, both I think mentally and emotionally. I think a lot of people have I interact with a lot of friends and colleagues that have these sort of incredibly lofty goals that feel probably way far out. To me, I never was like that 10 to 15 year guy. I was always that 1 to 2, 3 to 5. To me, that felt very tangible, and I could almost at times feel like I could reach it or taste it or see it, and so it helped me pursue it. And then I just trusted the process, the long game process, that if I was able to sort of on the game of life, the Candyland game or whatever game you may be playing, if you can get to that next phase, then you can move to the next phase, but you can't get there before you get there. And the proverbial, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, was something I've really tried to embrace in my career. It's allowed me not to, frankly, beat myself up over expectations, which has allowed me to continue to be my own fan of myself over the years, which I think has led me to remain optimistic and positive and supportive of my own journey, and obviously everyone who has been supportive of my journey, your journey, all of our other journeys. I appreciate that, but I think the most important person to be proud of your own journey is you.
God, that's so insightful. I'd never thought about that or heard that of being a fan of yourself. And I think that, and we were talking about this off air before we kind of on, I think it's so easy to beat yourself up. We were talking about the imposter syndrome, like, well, I know all my flaws, and I'm probably making a few up that don't exist. I love that concept of being a fan of yourself.
Well, it's something that we recently even spoke about in a meeting, because there's a lot of folks at every level in this industry, and this is cross industries as well, but I'll use an example of executives and others that really are quite frankly great at what they do, but they're very humble people, and they don't want the spotlight to be on them, because they don't want it to be about them. what I've realized over the last couple of years is people connect with people. And just because the camera may be on you or we're doing a podcast together, the story is actually really not about you or I. They may hear a tidbit of our story, but ultimately they apply it to their own life. And so this is partly why over the last couple of years I've leaned into a lot of this, because there was moments where I'm like, wow, this is a lot. Is the spotlight too bright? Is Tony too in the forefront? But I've realized, taking the focus off of myself, that I'm just a conduit in these situations and in these conversations for people to really look at themselves and say, oh, hey, something that Andrew said, something that Tony said really sparked something in me that made me a better me. And so that's why I've chose to lean into all of this. And I think people are starting to see now the momentum of a lot of that energy and belief in self. But ultimately, it's my message is, I may be here, but this is about you. This is about your self-actualization of what you're great at and what you want to work on. And ultimately, if I could inspire somebody through my own story, then that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, and I see that thread through your LinkedIn post. So like if anybody's listening to this and you're not following Tony on LinkedIn, go do yourself a favor, go do that right now. And then you can go kind of look through the back post. But this is something that I did want to ask you about, is like, how do you, I guess I get this question from folks all the time, is, well, how do you put yourself in a thought leadership position? You are prolific with doing what you just said, taking an experience of yours and framing it in a way that the reader is going to reflect something on them. How did you go about developing that skill? You guys, how are you so prolific with it? Your quotes. Talk to us about what your game plan is on LinkedIn, or is it just completely organic?
Yeah, I mean, initially it was incredibly organic from the start, and ultimately I wanted to create this probably virtual leader for people that didn't have them. And so people used to reach out to me a lot early on and say, and they still do to this day, I wish I had a boss or a leader like you.
Yeah.
And those are all very complimentary things, but ultimately they have to be able to navigate their circumstance. But ultimately what I wanted to be for people vicariously is somebody that they could look up to, that maybe their situation was not ideal and they were very frustrated, but there was one dude or a couple of people that they could just kind of go to for like some encouragement and some positive shine on this industry. And what I learned from almost 2 decades of ops experience is this is a really hard industry, and frankly, operators get crapped on from a lot of different angles, from residents, from sometimes their supervisors, sadly. Let's be honest, sometimes clients aren't the most easy to deal with. And so from every angle, they've really signed up for a career that they really get kind of poo-pooed on. And so for me, I kind of put those pieces together, still living that same experience as they have, but said, you know what, I'm going to shine my little light. Whoever may be following or may be interested, and obviously the light has grown and the visibility has grown, again, organically. Now, is it a little more strategic? It is. Am I mindful of some of the posts and the messages that I'm trying to send to the hardworking folks in property management? Yes. When I take a personal day, am I posting that purposely to let them know it's okay for them to also do that? I am.
Yeah.
Whereas I think initially I was just kind of, hey, today is a day off for me. But now it's, I understand my role has shifted, both within my company, but also I think within the industry. And I embrace this new role and this emerging role, and where it's to go, we don't know. But I understand I have a level of responsibility, and I'm willing to lean into that responsibility.
Well, and again, I appreciate that voice. And one thing I also would point out is, if you go and look at the consistency of it, you've been posting basically the same way. I'll call the same style, the same voice across multiple different companies. Now, your career's taken different paths, but that genuineness comes out through it. So what I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask anyway. What are your thoughts around people sharing more personal things on LinkedIn? I hear this debate all the time. It's like, that's not something you should share on LinkedIn. I'm personally a big fan of, heck, I've got a picture of my wife with me on my banner on LinkedIn. So I'm pretty obvious where I stand on this. But what are your thoughts around that? And how do you navigate that effectively without going too far?
Well, what I did early on and what I may recommend to some folks that are having a hard time riding that line, and I think for some, naturally, maybe like you and I, maybe some others, we kind of understand this line of TMI and then professional connection. And ultimately, I think a good rule of thumb is there should be some professional connection to the message, even if it is about your family, because there's a lot of connectivity there. You and I both know you have a banner that has your lovely family on your banner. What I did early on, though, is something I would suggest some content creators or those who want to get into the game is have a small circle of people that you really trust, that you can send them either your pre-written posts or some of your content to say, hey, is this TMI, guys, or is this, how is this going to be perceived? I'm pretty locked in at this point in regards to how the audience is going to perceive a lot of my content, because I just, over so many years, I've really, created a fairly intimate relationship with this audience of sorts, and I really understand what pains them, what they like, what they don't like, what their challenges are. I understand this industry very well as well. So, but I think if you're new to the game, even if you're on the supplier side or ops side, have people around you that can kind of help you navigate that content map. Because at first it could be a little daunting for a lot of reasons. I think, I see a lot of content creators sort of pop up and I think try to keep up, and then they fade off because it's hard. And I think, you're an athletic guy, you probably do a lot of running, right? It's like that guy that really just sprints and catches up to you and says, hey, I'm going to hang out with you. But is he conditioned in the same way that you are? Probably not, because this is a long race. So, welcome. But this is a long race ahead.
Well, I mean, you mentioned something that's really key is, you've been developing the character for years. It's not a short game. It's not, and you got to be dedicated to it. You got to keep on going to it. It's one of the things, like I have sales reps we work with here at RealPage all the time, and I'm not trying to throw any of them under a bus. That's not my point. But a lot of them will go like, okay, how do I get your influence like right now? And okay, my influence is nowhere close to some of the others in this organization, your own, but consistency and just deliver value and execute.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people overthink it too. Like I think where guys like you, guys like me have risen with visibility is through authenticity. I think we've shown that we're willing to be ourselves in the highs, the lows, the changes of employment, changes of company, changes of position. I'm not so concerned about telling a positive story. I'm more concerned about telling a true story. And being an actor and from the movie business early on, that's what the best filmmakers do is they tell an authentic story. And some of the best stories and best movies that we enjoy watching, frankly, don't have a happy ending in the end. And that's okay. Life is tough. Life is difficult. Ideally, I'd like to think, it'll be a happy ending and then things will go well and you're right off into the sunset. But I'm willing to tell the story, and I think the audience knows and recognizes that I'm willing to tell it through my own lens, in its most authentic way. And as you know, I share when my children lose games and are really sad, and those who have kids know it's not an overnight process to get over some of that, right? It's not just a post and it's done. It's ongoing conversations at home about how to look at things and how to be encouraged, and then they'll take it with a grain of salt because they don't listen to their parents. They'll go on, and then we'll come back and have that conversation again. But those who have kids, understand this, or people in their life that they're mentoring. But ultimately, I think why, I've been able to work with this community of followers and participants. Frankly, I love that it's becoming more of an organic participating party. In the commentary and threads, and we're sharing a lot of information. It's really become quite wonderful.
So I agree, and I love being on the outside, being able to watch it and comment and do those types of things. I do want to tie this back into kind of the way RPM is embracing this. So a theme I've seen from you recently, and I absolutely agree, by the way, is there seems to be a push, whether it's organic or intentional at RPM, to really celebrate wins publicly. on social media from all levels. Is that a strategy thing you guys are going with now? Is it just people are embracing it, or what's that culture shift that looks like it's happening anyways?
Well, I don't think it's a culture shift, but it is one of our core values that is spoken about highly and often at the highest ranks and really at the lowest levels, or at the property level, if you will. I don't like to say lowest levels, but to celebrate wins. And there's quite a few other sort of core values that we really celebrate within. I think what's exciting and what's happening and the momentum that you're speaking about is I think people are excited to share with the world these wins.
Yeah.
And I think putting people like myself and others in place to fan the flames of this excitement and these wins to a greater public community, I think they're just getting momentum. I think they're getting courage. I think they're getting excited, and it all seems to be culminating all at the same time. And again, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. To be frank, I think this momentum and the tsunami is coming, and it's exciting.
Okay, so the tsunami is coming, and I think a part of that is putting you on a surfboard about to take off down the face, because they've moved. Correct me wrong. You've moved into an entirely new position outside of true operations now, and more on the marketing side. Talk about what that vision for that spot is.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I mean, overnight I was thrust into ops, asset calls, and then really overnight into marketing, PR meetings, a whole bunch of other things, and made me quickly realize I'm not a marketer. Although I understand branding pretty well, and personal branding and company branding. But I work with an incredible team of marketers and PR associates and leaders. Way too many to even list and name, but I've learned a lot myself. But yeah, overnight I've been thrust into that situation, and it's been exciting. And frankly, it's probably a lane that I didn't know I was as good at as I feel comfortable in. And really, I see this role more than anything as really just a conduit of exciting energy, both internally and externally. So not everybody knows, of course, what is happening internally, right? Internal portals, other things that are happening, how we're doing an incredible job at all facets of the operation to sort of build and bubble this exciting energy internally. And what's happening is you're just starting to see what's happening from the inside now, out through the skin, if you will, right? So you're a healthy guy, you understand everything that's going on the inside will make itself sort of present on the outside, often through symptoms and skin and other things like that. So I think that's what's happening, metaphorically with our company, is that all that the ops leaders and our seasoned executive leaders have been doing, for so many years now, I can help fan those flames and help get that word out of all the wonderful work that so many people have done.
So for RPM, was this something that they are recently investing in from a media perspective? Because again, I see all the time in front of camera, little clips doing those types of things. All in-house RPM team? Are you contracting that out, or what's the dedication level?
No, it's a fair question. We have a really elaborate marketing team internally. So most of everything you see right now is in-house production.
Wow, big dedication.
And listen, I mean, we're not going to stop here. I think what's happening, what we're seeing from an algorithm standpoint, a data standpoint, a click standpoint, a view standpoint, is all data indicators are telling us that we're doing the right things. So with that, will come further investment in both people and tool to make that happen.
Sure. So where because again, I'm obviously sitting in a real page studio. We've heavily invested in the same type of thing. What part of the future of the use of media within multifamily kind of gets you the most excited? And I know I didn't prep you with that question, but I'm curious to get an answer.
Yeah, well, my background, Andrew, is even before I became an actor, as a journalist. So what I'm most excited about personally, upon all these other things that are happening and the role that I get to play in all of them, is to really be able to flex some of my journalism muscle in doing what you're doing right now, is being able to sort of get the most and best out of the people in front of me or virtually, is to be able to sort of ask them the questions that I think an audience, either internally or externally, would like to know. I did it for quite a few years, and I used to speak with government officials and politicians and all different sorts. And so I had to learn the art of building rapport to get information that I needed to, especially from those who are really good at spinning things. And so I really cultivated that over some decades, through the interview process and through my own process, to where now I'm really excited to be able to ask, questions that I think get the best answers. And I'm not here to try to, I'm not going to put anyone on blast by any means, but I will tell the guests as the RPM podcast, starts to really take off. We're gonna touch on some things, and let me know if there's some things off limits. But I really challenge you to think about those off limit things, because frankly, those off limit things are the things that people want to hear.
Yeah, I so appreciate that, because you and I had a pre-conversation where we talked about this. I'm not interested in doing just a propaganda podcast. It's like we want to ask real questions. So one of the questions I'll ask you, again, I didn't prep you on this one, but since you get do the hard hitting ones, what's at the tip of everyone's tongue in every conference you go to, and no one can truly define it just yet, but is that concept of specialization or centralization, et cetera. As someone who was recently on the operations side, how do you feel about it, and what do you think the opportunity is there, aside from just, hey, we might be able to save a bit of money, which we'll see if that actually proves out or not.
Yeah, I think it's the future for this business. I think for all businesses, it's the future, and I think it's taken us quite a few years to accept that. For a handful of reasons. I think the initial knee-jerk reaction ops-wise, especially the site level, is the concern for loss of jobs, and I think that's the primary pushback ultimately, is I don't want to be out of work, and so I'm not going to agree upon or embrace technologies that potentially could put me out of work. I think AI is another discussion for sure. That as well. And so I understand it, I respect it. I think at this point in the game, with how quickly technology is moving towards that direction, I think we, as operators, if you're listening to this and you're going to conferences and you're hearing a lot about it, I think instead of resisting, I think at this point it's time to embrace, and it's time to properly vet the technologies to find out what's best for your organization. But ultimately, I think if you want to be an innovator in your space and want to also be seen within your company as somebody who's the go-to expert, then if you haven't already, spend a lot of time in this space understanding the technologies, because you will be a go-to person for executives and other decision makers to say, what do we do here and how do we leverage this? And I don't think it's as daunting as we maybe thought it was early on. I think there's a place for what my friend Stephanie Anderson calls, sort of AI and HI, human intelligence and artificial intelligence. And I think you want to be the individual or the group of people that talk about how that relationship will happen in our industry as we move forward. So it's been something that I too, frankly, self-admittedly have been a little resistant to, but ultimately I think resistance is not the lane and not the direction we should go any further. I think we need to continue to go down this road of centralization, technology, and AI to find ways to create efficiencies for the property, obviously bottom line results for the property as well. And I don't think resistance to some of this is going to play out well for those who resist.
Well, and I think that what gets overlooked sometimes with the resistance mindset is the jobs that it also creates and the new career paths that it potentially can create. And that's actually one of the things that's gotten me the most excited about really putting my head down and studying this and thinking about different ways this actually could be applied is, it's both frightening and super exciting. It really has the opportunity to break the business model that you and I grew up in. Starting off as a lease professional, finding your way through. I've talked about it before on the podcast, but really giving people multiple lanes, I think, has that opportunity if you do it right. So I didn't mean.
Yeah, and I think you have to have that mindset. And unfortunately, I'm not sure our industry has always cultivated that entrepreneurial mindset, innovative mindset, especially on the ops side.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate because for whatever reason, maybe I came from Silicon Valley, California. I've always been in that mindset to say change is good and let's find a way to adapt and thrive in the new environment. But I just don't think our industry has always done a great job of really encouraging that mindset. I think it's more of a mindset. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
I'd echo that, and I'm kind of with you on that one. I'm always if it's not broke, break it. You know, let's go fix it. So talking from one future that you were kind of hesitant, maybe reluctant on in the centralization. I guess let's call it a little bit later to thinking about it rather than reluctant. What I mean, RealPage technology company. I got to ask a technology question at some point. What technology is out there for multifamily operations or owners that either has you excited or you think the possibility of it really does excite you?
Well, I think we mentioned it. I think the use of artificial intelligence is going to change everything.
Yeah.
And specifically, I think there's a lot of opportunity from a revenue management standpoint. I also think expense control, expense management as well. There's a lot of tools out there, but I think there's some really cool tools for on-site team members to maximize collections and reduce delinquencies as well. So I don't know if I want to name them by name out there right now per se, but I think there's some really cool things that are happening out there that we just have to be open-minded to and embrace and go through the pitch process and the demo process and ask the tough questions. A lot of those tough questions I really think, is this ready for full integration, and does this integrate? Obviously the big players are well positioned for that, as they should be. So I mean, I still think there's a lot of questions to be had. There's definitely a lot of trial and error ahead, but the technology is there, and frankly, you and I both know if you can imagine it, it's available.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the short breadth of this podcast so far, delinquency and collections is becoming a theme as to what people are actually excited about. You're not the first one to mention that. So super interesting.
Well, and it's you and I both know. I mean, it's the environment that we're currently in. Expense control, and of course, maximizing your revenue every penny you possibly can in this current environment.
Yeah. So okay, coming up on the end of our time, and Tony, there's always one question I ask all guests, and I'll save that one for the very end. But I was thinking as we went through this, I'm going to throw one more little curveball at you. One of the phrases I hear every once in a while from folks relatively new to the industry or relatively new to RealPage is like, hey, how do I be you when I grow up? If you were looking back and you had to give, or you could only give one piece of advice, we'll get to the book next, but if you give one piece of advice to someone who wants to make it to a position where they are considered a thought leader, or they do have a following, what would that one piece of advice be from you?
It's okay to believe in yourself. It's okay to believe in yourself. There's a lot of people telling you that, you're not supposed to be here, you're supposed to be here. My whole career, I was either told you're supposed to be a marketer, and when I was in marketing, you're an ops guy. And so if I listened to them, and at times early in my career, I listened to them more than I should have. And ultimately, I would just give the best piece of advice that I try to give to my children, to anyone who asks me, how do I get there, is at the end of the day, you have to believe in yourself, and it's okay to believe in what you have to offer today. And a lot of people deal with self-doubt, and I've been fortunate to have people around me, but ultimately I had to believe in myself to get to where I'm at.
So I'm going to ask you and juxtapose that against another thing you said on Mike Brewer's podcast is, how are you balancing believing in yourself, which is that number one thing you said, with the idea of you want to, start every morning with a breakfast of constructive criticism and finish the day with a serving of humble pie. I think I got it right.
Yeah. Well, I've grown up in an environment to where it wasn't always constructive feedback, and so I was trained young to take feedback, whether I wanted to or not. I think in professional environment, it's typically more constructive than not. But I've also found in my own personal life and professional life that the more feedback I can get that's constructive and poignant and specific, I can apply positive offsets to some of those shortcomings or challenges quicker than I could if I was sort of ambiguously floating in a whole bunch of sort of positive mush. And so I would say that to any sort of supervisor or leader, to say, do your team a favor and be very direct with them with that feedback. And it's not being mean, but it's being honest, and frankly, it's being very compassionate. And then, listen, I have people all around me that help keep my feet on the ground, and I wouldn't replace them for anything. The first one is my wife. She doesn't care who or what conference I'm speaking at or what podcast. You better go get the kids at 3:45, and if you're late, you're in trouble. So,
yep.
Having people like that and others in your life that are your true friends, and sometimes as your career grows, people gravitate to you, and sometimes you have to understand, are they here just to sell me a product or service, or are they here to be my friend genuinely? Are they here to support me because of the things that I've accomplished, or are they here just because because we connect personally? So, but ultimately, I think keeping your feet on the ground helps you understand who your audience is, and helps you really understand the challenges that they face, and that's going to continue to be a goal of mine, and frankly, one that I look at in this new role is, I think, in and of the way it's set up, it does disconnect me from operations because I'm not in those same meetings I used to be. So my goal really, in the coming months and let's call it years ahead, is to find unique ways to stay connected to the ground.
Yeah.
If that means quarterly field trips, and if I need to lease apartments for a day, and that helps me understand the challenges of leasing or packages or just today's customer, then that's part of market research in my mind to continue to stay connected to the ground.
Yeah, no, it's a huge portion of what I have to do, and I don't have nearly the same resources you do on that one. But in order for me to stay connected within the industry, especially the operations side, it's having that small. You mentioned it earlier. It's having that small group of people that you can go to and you can run ideas by and say, "Is this moronic?" And they will tell you unequivocally with all the love in their heart, "Yes, it is."
Terrible idea, Tony. Yeah. I've heard that more times than once.
Yeah. Okay. So last question that I wrap everything up with, and that is, if you could recommend one book to someone coming up in the industry and looking for a leadership position, what's the book that is your go-to?
Yeah, this is always a good one. I mean, there's a lot out there. I think, everyone talks about, Radical Candor and just a handful of books out there. But I'll tell you one that really changed the game for me, and I mention it very frequently. I don't get any proceeds from it, but it's called Touch Points. It's written by Doug Conant, who is the former CEO of Campbell's Soup. But really, he talked about those touch points and interactions you have with your employees are the work. I think oftentimes we as leaders think, having to come in on a conversation or check in with your teams and see how things are going, that's kind of a pain in my butt to do that because, I'm not a kindergarten teacher. It's just a mindset that I think is wrong, and really one that kind of changed my whole mindset of what leadership is to be able to check in on my teams and make sure they're doing all right and give them the guidance and support they may need to get the results they need. So that's a book you don't hear very often, but it's one that really changed the game for me as a young leader, and one I refer to, quite frankly, fairly often when I'm going through some things that I'm going through.
Awesome. Then I'm going to have to go pick it up because I have not read that one. So I appreciate you sharing the knowledge. Tony, I also appreciate you sharing your story. I appreciate you sharing the vision that RPM has kind of around where you're going with media. Again, any last things you want to share with the audience before I let you get the rest of your day back?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity, Andrew. It's been great to get to know you over the last, so many weeks. We've gotten to really, build a good friendship, and that's what it's about in this business. I think just continuing to grow authentic relationships, and anyone who wants to reach out to me, they're welcome to. And I think they'll quickly find that I'm a pretty normal dude, and we can share stories along the way.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Again, if you're not following him on LinkedIn, definitely go follow him on LinkedIn. And guys, have a great day. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Multifamily Talks, a Real Page podcast. As always, the views expressed are those of the individuals participating and not those of Real Page.